Rated T for teen.
Each year, thousands of adults lose their shred. It's an epidemic simply known as shred loss. But it doesn't have to be this way. Because rekindling your shred is as easy as playing the new Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4. With new parks, cross-platform multiplayer, and sick new game modes, we can put an end to shred loss everywhere. Get the new Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4 and show the world that the shred's not dead. Pre-order Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4 and play the Foundry demo.
Meet the most capable CRV Honda has ever dreamed of. The all-new CRV Trail Sport Hybrid. With all-terrain tires and available enhanced traction control, it's built for wherever the day takes you. Heated front seats and a heated steering wheel, ideal for winter drives and crisp early starts. And with generous cargo space, it's ready for big gear and even bigger getaways. The CRV Trail Sport Hybrid. Learn more at honda.com/CRV.
Members are getting even more from the DSR network. In addition to an ad-free listening experience, members-only content, and access to our Discord community, members will get access to a weekly wrap-up version of the DSR Daily 2 days before free listeners, and will get our brand new weekly Need to Know podcast a full week early. To become a member and get access to great content before anyone else, head to the dsrnetwork.com/buy and enter code DSR2025 for a special 40% discount on sign-up. That's code DSR2025 at the dsrnetwork.com/buy.
This is the Daily Blast from the New Republic, produced and presented by the DSR Network. I'm your host, Greg Sargent. President Trump has done it again. At a rally, he declared that his administration is now looking at suspending deportations for farm workers and other migrant workers. Trump openly admitted this will anger the radical right, by which he likely meant Stephen Miller, who suffers severe night terrors about the very possibility that he might fail to humiliatingly frog march every undocumented immigrant in this country, and many others, onto deportation planes. We think this should be understood as an admission of weakness by Trump, both substantively and politically. At a minimum, Trump wants the public to think that he's considering relaxing his mass deportation regime at exactly the moment when Congress has given him tens of billions of additional dollars for it. And MAGA personalities don't like this at all. Today we're discussing all this with journalist and historian Garrett Kraft, who has a new piece up on his Substack, Doomsday Scenario, about the coming ICE crackdown and the horrors we should expect from it. Garrett, thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, Greg.
So a few weeks back, Trump floated the idea that farm workers and hospitality industry workers might be spared deportations. This generated a huge backlash, after which he backed off and reiterated that all undocumented immigrants must be thrown out of the country. Yet on July 4th, at a rally, Trump again floated the idea. Listen to this.
People have worked for a farm on a farm for 14, 15 years, and they get thrown out pretty viciously, and we can't do it. We got to work with the farmers and people that have hotels and leisure properties too. We're going to work with them, and we're going to work very strong and smart, and we're going to put you in charge. We're going to make you responsible. And I think that that's going to make a lot of people happy. Now, serious radical right people, who I also happen to like a lot, they may not be quite as happy, but they'll understand, won't they? Do you think so?
Now, I don't buy that Trump will really go through with this, but he wants to be seen as entertaining it, and he knows MAGA wants a policy that's widely reviled by the public. That's a display of weakness. Your thoughts?
This is at least the second time that he has floated in some way the idea that there would be large categories of potential workers who would be exempted from this mass deportation. So Trump was inclined to start to roll back this, everybody goes mentality. And then Stephen Miller stepped in and said, no, we're going to keep this going. And in fact, what we've seen in these last couple of weeks with a particularly aggressive ICE deportation and seizure tactics really stem from Stephen Miller going to ICE leadership and saying, hey, we got to do this more quickly, more aggressively. You guys aren't meeting my hopes and dreams. And so not only do I feel like this represents an important sign of weakness in the unpopularity of this policy, but I also think it represents a secondary weakness about just how much Donald Trump is actually in control of his own administration. Who is the real president? Who is the real decision maker on immigration policy? Is it Donald Trump or is it Stephen Miller?
Well, Stephen Miller certainly is going to have a huge budget to carry out his vision. The Republicans just passed a bill that appropriates an extraordinary $45 billion for ICE detention. It also includes a huge explosion of hiring and ICE agents. You wrote in your piece that we aren't prepared for how deeply dangerous it'll be to have a massively paramilitary force of this size suddenly scaled up and given these vast new powers. Can you talk about that?
The reality is that no law enforcement organization can grow quickly, not even a healthy one. And you talk to almost anyone who's familiar with criminal justice and the history of policing in the United States, and they can rattle off for you exactly the agencies that have gone down this path of quick hiring surges for political reasons. Miami in the 1980s, the Metropolitan Police Department class of 1989 in Washington, D.C., where Mayor Marion Barry tried to actually double the size of the force in a single year. And both of those agencies saw enormous tidal waves of corruption and criminality and misconduct by their officers in the years that followed. As did the Border Patrol. And the reason is when you're trying to hire that quickly, all of your guardrails are removed. Agencies end up lowering their hiring requirements. They end up lowering their training standards. They end up lowering their supervision and field training standards. And you just have, when you're growing that quickly in an organization, you have people who are field trainers, who are supervisors, who are higher level officials, who are sort of pushed up in the promotion ranks faster than they should be. Now, ICE is actually even more uniquely vulnerable to these problems than almost any other federal law enforcement agency. It already has some of the lowest hiring standards in federal law enforcement. It already has one of the shortest training periods in federal law enforcement. It already has some of the lowest educational requirements of any federal law enforcement agency. And I think there's also, we have never seen an agency go through a hiring spree at this point as politicized and partisan and sort of authoritarian as ICE. And that's what really, really worries me.
Well, I want to underscore here that every single thing that comes out of this administration, whether it's Trump or Stephen Miller, everything they're saying screams to ICE agents that they are unshackled, right? Whether it's Stephen Miller telling ICE officials in private that they've got to hit these supercharged new arrest quotas. MAGA personalities in particular are absolutely salivating for the very conflict, the very clashes you're discussing there. They really just cannot wait for these kind of not very well trained ICE agents who are just used to kicking people around as if they're just, dirty migrants getting loosed. They're really excited about it, viscerally. And so they're very unhappy about Trump floating this idea of sparing farm workers. Let's listen to a couple. First, here's major MAGA influencer Charlie Kirk, who confirms that MAGA won't like it one little bit. Listen to this, courtesy of Media Matters.
Now, this is not by any means a knock on President Trump. It is a knock on people that are trying to pressure President Trump and pressure him hard. We don't know any of the details, but President Trump did say that the radical right people that he has a soft spot for wouldn't like this. Hello. Hi. I'm one of those radical right people. And I want to know what I'm not going to like because of all the different stuff that's in front of us. If you want to break our coalition, go and push amnesty. That right there would be a complete collapse of everything that we have worked for. Everything.
I love the way he can only blame people who are pressuring Trump and not Trump himself, because that would presumably be too much for his audience to bear. But that aside, this idea that not deporting migrant workers would break the MAGA coalition, as Kurt put it, is really telling. A large chunk of MAGA wants every single undocumented immigrant deported, but some around Trump know that's a political disaster. That doesn't seem bridgeable. It's a schism that isn't going away. Garrett, what do you think?
Yeah, and I think that this also has to do with, the challenge of a lot of Donald Trump's promises, which is the sort of unreality of that which plays well at rallies versus the actual implementation of thoughtful policy in America. Every single person who knows anything about the U.S. economy who heard Donald Trump promise these mass deportations and immigration enforcement during the campaign knew that this was exactly the problem that was going to come up, is that, you pick whatever number you actually believe is the right number, 10 million, 13 million, more, less in terms of undocumented immigrants who are here. That's a pretty big chunk of the U.S. workforce, a pretty big chunk of people who actually, legally pay taxes and contribute to the U.S. economy year in and year out. And, you can't just remove them in the way that I think sort of the magical thinking of the MAGA rally crowd believes, because they are literally doing jobs that Americans will not do for similar pay. And if you are Donald Trump, realizing that you basically won the presidency based on the unhappiness around inflation that your predecessor experienced post-COVID, you're really terrified about the inflationary pressures of immigration enforcement and, by the way, tariffs, which is sort of the other thing that you watch Donald Trump sort of hem and haw over the difference between what he's willing to promise in rally snippets and Oval Office snippets versus what he is actually able to accomplish and wants to accomplish.
Well, there was a second MAGA person who really kind of put it out there in a way that really underscores your point. It's from MAGA media figure Michael Knowles. Listen to this again, courtesy of Media Matters.
I think this could be a perilous objective for him. I don't think this is necessarily the right course to go down. I see why. I see why he's going down it, because he's got friends, especially in the business community, who say, I'm losing all my workers. Go after the illegals who aren't workers. Go after the illegals who are just sucking off welfare. Go after the workers who are criminals. Go after the workers with the face tattoos. 11 million to 16 million illegal aliens in this country. If you want to actually start to rectify that situation, you can't just deport the ones with face tattoos. You do kind of have to deport Abuela.
Note that Knowles openly declares that Trump is going after people who are not gang members, their grandmothers. Knowles just says, well, that's good. This is exactly what MAGA wants, deporting grandmothers. I guess points for honesty or something, Garrett?
Yeah. And like, this is also, the challenge of what we have watched ICE unfold, and as it has sort of turbocharged immigration. ICE is an agency that is coming up on 20 years old at this point. And in both Democratic administrations and Republican administrations, it has done good work. And in the Obama years, Obama's ICE actually deported more people than George W. Bush's administration. But what you saw was ICE focusing on actual legit criminals, gang members, cartel members, people who were actually here, doing bad things. And the honest answer is that's not a huge number. I'm not saying ICE was absolutely perfect in the Obama years. I'm not saying it was absolutely perfect in the Biden years. I'm not saying, there weren't, hard and emotional cases during either of those years, but there were sort of frameworks of prosecutorial discretion that really saw people and leadership and officers focused on deporting actually bad people. But those people are hard to find and locate, and there aren't that many of them. And so the moment you begin to turn this dial up to say, we need 3,000 people a day, 4,000 people a day, 5,000 people a day that we're arresting and deporting, you need to get into, deporting exactly the people who have been making headlines over the last couple of weeks, who are, people who have lived in the United States, made lives in the United States for 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years in some cases, and, have paid taxes, have raised families, have worked hard at their jobs, had careers, and, are the people who the business community is really worried about targeting.
So, Garrett, I want to underscore the importance of what you said there because I still think people miss it. The second Stephen Miller starts to shriek internally that he wants 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, a million arrests a day, they have to go after the grandmothers. There's no other way to get the numbers up there. You cannot get the numbers up there unless you go after the grandmothers and all that they represent. You can't get the numbers up by going after criminals for two reasons. One, there aren't enough of them. And two, it's incredibly resource intensive to go after the criminals. It's less resource intensive to go after the abuelas and to deport, day laborers from a parking lot at Home Depot. And that is the fundamental box that Trump is in here, and others around him who recognize, unlike Stephen Miller, that deporting every last migrant in this country is a political disaster for them.
Yeah, and an economic disaster. Like that, that's the underlying argument to this. Is it's the reason that it's bad politics is partially the emotional response of the families and communities that are being disrupted, and partly because it is going to tank the U.S. economy, and particularly sectors in America where they rely on undocumented, under the table labor, construction, hospitality, agriculture.
MAGA views it as a civilizational emergency to have undocumented immigrants in this country at all, no matter how unthreatening. The broader public doesn't view it that way. The broader public tolerates the presence of undocumented immigrants who are working jobs, who have been here a very long time, who have families, who are tied to communities. And this is, I think, the basic admission we saw from Trump up there, that that's an unbridgeable schism and a Gordian knot that can't really be cut very easily.
Yeah, and I think I would put, Greg, a slightly sharper point on what you just said, which is this is a schism between the white nationalist and white supremacist believers and wing of Donald Trump's supporters, And everyone else in America who views America's diversity as its historic strength and not a weakness. And that this is a sort of fundamental existential disagreement between the racist white supremacists and white nationalists who formed much too large of a core and foundation of support for Donald Trump and the MAGA movement, and sort of everyone else in America who believes in just a different vision for a country that has always viewed immigration as its greatest strength.
Really well put, Garrett Graff. Folks, if you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to check out his podcast, Long Shadow. Garrett, thanks so much for coming on with us, man.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to The Daily Blast with me, your host, Greg Sargent. The Daily Blast is a New Republic podcast and is produced by Riley Fessler on the DSR Network.